Welcome to episode 13. Hazel, welcome to our episode for this afternoon. It's really great to have you here with us.
Thank you so much.
And we wouldn't have been able to do this without our sponsors. And our first sponsor for this episode is the Hello Craft range. In April of this year, they would have been trading for 2 years, which is a great achievement for a local company. It's a family-run business. Their products are available in your local Spar, local delis, and even outlying towns like Prieska, Bloemfontein, and Gauteng. Yes, from our perspective in PU, we see Gauteng as a town. Hello Craft Rain is made from quality muesli at exceptional price. It's made in small batches to ensure quality of the product and authenticity and flavor. The main ingredient is oats, and we all know that that is part of the best ingredient for your most important meal of the day. So be on the lookout for the Hello Craft range in your local Spar or local deli. Hazel, thank you for being with us. It's so great that you were able to make time for us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Did you maybe want to share a bit about you, who you are as a person?
Sure. So I'm a registered counsellor in private practice. I have 2 children, teenagers, and am married to the Vrydag in die Baai famous
The champion
guy.
of Vrydag in die Baai.
The originator. And big animal lover, and I'm quite excited to be here because there's been amazing growth in my practice and in myself through the COVID period. So I am looking forward to discussing that.
Awesome. Hazel, as we look back on what's been happening with COVID, do you maybe want to share from a professional perspective what your involvement was during this time, your experience of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm affiliated with an employee wellness program,
I didn't catch that.
which works with different hospitals, and I have a special interest in trauma and have done a lot of work in trauma. So during the first wave, I was very involved with doing trauma debriefings at many of the hospitals.
Okay.
So I would see the nurses, the cleaners, the laundromat workers, the doctors, the porters, absolutely everybody. And everybody was affected emotionally and physically and mentally by this.
That's actually quite interesting, Hazel. I just want to pause there for a second, because if I think of the effect and the impact of COVID on frontline workers, you immediately think of your doctors and your nurses. But what you're saying is even the people that are responsible for cleaning, janitorial services, that they were impacted by this as well.
Enormously.
So it's we sometimes kind of miss that, but it's key people, it's important people, and even though there's no direct connection there's still an impact and effect.
Very much, because with the laundromat, they would need to open the bags of laundry, knowing that this has been on a COVID bed, and knowing that they need to handle that, and the fear of getting it, as well as the cleaners. They don't know when they've been exposed or not when they're cleaning in a hospital, so they needed to take extra precautions, and it was very stressful.
Yeah. And it's that constant state of worry that causes that anxiety that over a prolonged period leads to mental health challenges.
Absolutely. It very much was described to me by many as a war. It felt like it was a world war, this war against COVID, and them being in the middle of it.
Yeah. And reflecting on our session this afternoon, what I was thinking is, I think the big challenge we had with COVID was the unpredictability of it.
Absolutely.
That people first, like, it's not airborne, then it is airborne, then we don't know, but let's be aware of that just in case. And I think it's all of the just in case that just added to the anxiety, because now something else is added to this stress that you're in, plus there's this, well, we actually don't know. And I think for us as human beings, we like to be in a space where we think we know, and it's a false sense of security, and we carry on with our lives just to have the mat pulled out from under your feet.
I think we were also very arrogant, because I actually remember reading an article or Googling something the year before COVID hit, and reading about the Spanish influenza, and I remember thinking, thank God we are so medically advanced that nothing like this would happen to us.
So you caused COVID.
Sorry, my fault. But I think that was also the general view, is we are so medically advanced, how can this thing just come and attack us out of nowhere? So definitely blindsided everybody.
Now, Hazel, from your experience and stories that you shared with people, what were some of the stories of hope that you've experienced?
So during the second wave, I was very, very blessed, and I do think it was definitely God's hand in placing me there. I worked at a hospital in my private capacity, where I was working directly with the doctors and the patients' families. So I would contact the families on behalf of the doctors every single day. And I started this in mid-December, and this was during the absolute peak of the second wave, which was insane. And I remember the stress, or the feeling. It was busy, chaos. And I remember the Christmas, there was a patient that I knew there had been a number of losses due to COVID just before this person was diagnosed with COVID and was on a ventilator. And I remember waking up Christmas morning knowing that this person's not close to their family, and it's hard to be speaking to the families and knowing. And I just lay there at like 3 o'clock in the morning praying, like meditating, praying for this person. And I had taken Christmas off, and when I got there on Boxing Day, she had started to come off the ventilator. Okay. And this person, a week later, was able to go home back to their family.
Really?
And that was my first big story of hope that I was a part of. And that experience has been amazing. There's also been, and I can't speak about it because there's a patient that's been in the paper, and there's a patient that's been in the Huisgenoot that I was very involved in. Of course, I couldn't read the Huisgenoot article. Shot at him.
Give you
a
summary.
But, that both of these stories, but the one in particular with this gentleman, his muscles had gone into such atrophy from being on a ventilator for over 100 days that he'd been on a ventilator, and he wasn't able to even lift up his finger. He wasn't able to lift up his head. And the despair that this man has felt.
Is that the extent of the loss of muscle ability for 100 days?
Yes.
That you even struggle to lift up your head?
Yes.
Is that the physical impact on your body?
Absolutely. He wasn't even able to lift up his head. So so the physio did explain to me, and had needed to re-explain to him every day, that he hadn't been impacted in a way that he was in a car accident and there was spinal damage or something preventing him from moving again. Yeah. It was just a matter of getting those muscles moving. And but this person was in such despair, and every day his wife would send me a Bible verse and a prayer, and every morning I'd go do it with him. And anybody that knows me knows I talk a hind leg off a donkey, so I would stand next to him and just talk and tell him about what my kids had been up to the day before, or my dog, or cats, or husband, and I also remember that. And then I used to tease him and say, you're obviously getting irritated with all my talking, and he would like shake his head, and I'd say, are you sure you still want to hear more about this? And he would nod his head, and he wasn't able to talk back. But anyways, this person then went to a rehabilitation center after us calling in his family twice to say goodbye, after his wife had begged the doctors not to stop treatment. And he eventually he went to a rehab center, and the week before last he walked himself out of the rehab center.
Wow.
Yeah, after over 150 days of not being home.
That's amazing. Isn't it?
Yeah. So I remember the day that he took his first steps was actually on my birthday, and she sent me the video, and I was sitting outside my daughter's school, And next to me was a miracle that we'd had. His wife was in the car next to me, and she also knew this family. She received the video at the same time, and we were both sitting in our cars crying, and we looked over at each other, and we were like, did you get the video? And then we just hugged and stood there, and my kids came out and like, oh, mother, must you embarrass us? So there has been amazing miracles.
Yeah.
There's another one, a lady who was also on a ventilator for over 100 days, 101 days. And she could move a little bit better, but she went home from rehab the week before last as well. So there's been amazing stories and miracles that have come out of this.
What would you say is the burden that this places on a family? Because to have that family member in hospital on a ventilator, what is like the emotional challenges that a family then faces?
Yeah, there's definitely, I think the biggest thing is the not knowing what's happening to your family member, not being able to physically see them because you can't visit, not knowing exactly what's happening with them, and I could relate it to an experience that I'd had when Chart had the stroke. I could go into the ICU and I could look at his charts and read what the nurses had said, because I'm that person, and but it still wasn't enough information. So for me, the biggest thing was to feed families information, because I think
because
that
now
was a
with
huge
COVID,
stress.
it's not like they could go and visit and they could just see
Yes.
that my dad, my
Yes.
brother, my husband is okay.
Exactly.
I have to rely on somebody else giving me that
Exactly.
information.
Exactly. So that is a huge strain and burden on a family, and there's just this enormous absence, from what I can understand, being described to me, that there's this hole in the house, in the home,
Okay.
that is
Wow.
empty with that person gone.
And it's that waiting period, because there's no definitive answer.
Unfortunately, that's, I think, been the biggest frustration, is COVID doesn't have a trend,
Yeah.
and you can't predict what will happen.
There's no predictability within that, in terms of getting it,
Yes.
not getting it. When you have it,
Yes.
then is it going to be severe? Is it going to be mild? Is it going to be light?
And also, a question that was always asked of me: so they're off the ventilator. What's the next step? How long until they're home?
Okay.
And I can never give that answer, because it's absolutely different for everybody. Yeah.
Now, in terms of you interacting with the families, percentage-wise, ratio-wise, we've talked about hope, success stories, but how many ratio-wise negative messages did you have to bring to families?
I tend to be. I've tried to be more of an optimist than a pessimist, so I kind of don't have a number even in my
without
head.
giving false hope, obviously.
Yes, but I would say, unfortunately, there are, like for me, if somebody's stagnating, it means they are not getting worse. But if they stagnate for too long, they're not getting better either. So those are the sad phone calls that I need to make, and especially the phone calls where families were allowed to come in and say goodbye if it was end of life.
Sure.
So that
And
was hard.
that must have taken a burden on you personally.
I had one, I call it my Grey's Anatomy moment, where there was a loss, and I just, it hit me hard, because this family had actually said to me that they used to come and stand under the hospital's ICU and pray during the first wave of COVID for the nurses and the doctors and the patients, and then we lost this person. And so I call it my Grey's Anatomy moment, where I threw my scrub cap very dramatically across the changing room and ran out of the hospital, and then went to the parking lot and phoned my supervisor and screamed a bit at him, and then also said to God, like, why, this is not fair, this doesn't make sense, this is not okay, like, where are you? Yeah, that was a particularly hard moment.
And I can understand within that context, because it's been building up, and it's that specific story that you shared, so you're there and you understand that reference. And how did that, over the period of you being involved within this position, how did that impact your relationship with God? And how did that play a part in your experience of what you've been going through?
Well, it definitely brought me closer. I prayed far more, I think, in the last 6 months than I've ever done in my life, because I would often go stand next to a patient, and if I was playing, because I would play voice notes for them from their family members, and I would stand and just pray in my head for the person. And also I suddenly took note of things that I'd never noticed before, that I was so grateful for. So especially in the first couple of weeks when it was hot and it was December, and I would phone on my drive home, and everybody would get the pool, the tube ready for me, because I would go swim, and I would go and lie there and just put my head back and feel the sun on my face, and just be grateful and go like, wow, you created this, and this is something that I've taken so for granted. And I think I watched my first sunrise on Christmas Eve since I was a teenager, where I stood at the back door because I couldn't sleep, and I made myself some coffee, and I was like, wow, this is the sun rising. Yeah, so I definitely connected with so many of the gifts that we have from God, that hadn't connected with in so long.
That's awesome. So in a sense, it's easy to just simply focus on the negative and bring that into your relationship with God, and lose focus of what we take for granted, what we have, what is there, and which we also receive from Him.
Absolutely.
And I know that a lot of people struggle with this why question, and it's an important question to ask. We should never shy away from asking the why. Why isn't a sign that we don't have faith. Why is part of this relationship that I'm in with God, and finding an answer to this why, and that strengthens the relationship. If you avoid that why question, you're never going to get to the point where you work through it, and bring you closer to God.
Absolutely. And it was actually this patient's husband that comforted me, ironically, and he said to me, she's earned her angel wings, Hazel, and she was ready to go. It's okay.
Yeah.
And that blew me away, like completely blew me away. So, yeah, I think I find it so interesting that a disease came about that we can only treat with vitamins. It's
yeah, there's no answer for it.
Yeah, there are obviously you treat with meds, but I mean, if you or I get COVID and we're at home, the doctor's they actually prescribe vitamins, and that just blows my mind. That our food has gotten so bad, our health has gotten so bad that we have to take vitamins for an illness.
I just want to go back to that statement that the husband made to you, and I think we also, within this struggling with God, wrestling with God, if we, in that space, what we often miss is the fact that for us as Christians, death isn't the end. It's been an amazing journey, and for some people it's been a difficult journey, and that transition period might have been extremely difficult, but it's now the start of something new, and we still miss that person. It doesn't make the missing any better. It doesn't take away that pain. It doesn't fill that void that loss leaves, but at least there's still hope after that. It's not just the book is now closed and I'll put that book away.
I think there is a great reality that a lot of people are questioning their faith after some losing loved ones from COVID. That husband was the exception, an exception.
Absolutely.
And I think that is going to have a lasting effect, and that us as a church, people who are churchgoers and believers, are going to have to work extra hard during this and after this we need to accept that people are angry, and try and lead them back into a living relationship with God, because there has been a lot of rejection, unfortunately.
Yeah. And people are in the space where questions they wouldn't have asked a year and a half back is now a reality for them, and it's things that they go through, and like you said, it's a call to action for us to respond to people that have got these questions, and our natural instinct is to shy away from it, but it's an open door right there, not for us to push open,
Yes.
but to say like, hey, do you want to have a coffee? Do you want to talk about this?
Absolutely.
And just get a different perspective, because we know if we look at the Old Testament, for instance, we really find it there where people wrestled with God. They had these questions, and they had that robust enough relationship to say to God, this is what I'm struggling with. I'm being open and honest with it. But we often think we need to package it so it sounds better and it looks better. But the reality is the reality. You can't escape that.
Exactly. I think that's a very valid point. Yeah, to not shy away from those questions, because they.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Hazel, thank you very much for that. Is there maybe something you want to share with us before we finish?
Yeah, well, I think just about COVID is I've noticed such a stigma, the stigma that's been attached to it, and words being used like this person's status, and that has a negative connotation, and I'd like people out there to sort of realize that the language we use in terms of COVID is it's a scary illness, and it is very contagious, but it's not a lifelong thing, and it's not something we should don't go. I mean, people need to isolate, but also don't reject that person because they have COVID, which I'm finding people are doing at the moment.
Okay. That's interesting. No, thanks a lot for that thought as well. And if you listening and you sitting with this question of why do people suffer, why does God allow people to suffer, the good news is in our life groups starting next week, we've got a new series called The Messy Middle, which deals exactly with that. When you're going through something like this and you sit in the middle of that messy middle where you're in there's not going to be a quick solution to this, and you can't see the end yet. How do you deal with that? So the first part deals specifically with where does suffering come from, and why does God allow suffering? So if that's a question that's lying heavily on your heart and you would like a new perspective on that, feel free to contact me. Use the chat that's available. Email me, dirk@waypoint.org.za, and we'll connect you to a group for 2 weeks to experience this topic with us. That's so relevant for a lot of people.
That sounds exciting and relevant, absolutely.
Yeah. Hazel, I want to say thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. And it was a pleasure chatting to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. And our last sponsor for this episode is The Cradle. The Cradle is a supply of anything artistic, from ceramics and sculpture to sugar art and cake decorations. They do it all. The owner, Rochelle Higu, graduated with a visual art degree, majoring in sculpture in 2019. And The Cradle's mission is focused around Romans 8 verse 28 that says, those called according to his purpose for them. And what she's saying is that we're all called to serve, and we place there. So thank you to The Cradle and the Hello Food range. Hazel, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, and remember, have a great week.